The session is being recorded now. Please make sure your mic is muted, and when you have a question, you'll be asked to unmute and acknowledged at that time. This is the 7th annual Black Sustainability Summit. This is panel session number 5, Alternative Economics with Dr. Nelson and Ajua Afiteo. Ifateo. Is that correct? All right, perfect. And we're gonna get into their bios. Ms. Ifateo is a grassroots economic organizing. Ella J. Baker, intentional community cooperative. She's an activist in the worker cooperative movement, a writer, a co-founder of the Ella Joe Baker Intentional Community Cooperative for Social Activists, a 15-unit housing cooperative in Columbia Heights neighborhood of Washington, D.C. She is also the co-editor of a grassroots economic organizing and online publication that advocates for and catalyzes cooperatives and the solidarity. Oh, that's one of my words that I messed up. When everyone's in alignment together, economy. She has a master's degree in community economic development and business administration from Southern New Hampshire University. She is also currently a master's degree candidate in clinical nutrition at Maryland University of Integral Health in Largo, Maryland. She plans to operate a functional medicine nutritional practice, research, and write articles for public nutritional education, and to organize community health cooperatives with special emphasis on improving the health and lives of African Americans and other poor and marginalized communities. Next, we have Dr. Claire Nelson. Dr. Claire Nelson is the chief from the Futures Forum, and she is chief ideation leader of the Futures Forum, a research and education practice specializing in bringing the power of strategic foresight and the discipline of sustainable engineering to challenges facing organizations and communities. Nelson, named on Forbes as one of the top 50 female futurists in the world, is an author for the game-changing book, Smart Futures for a Flourishing World, a paradigm for advancing global sustainability. A sought-after consultant and speaker, Dr. Nelson is also founding president of the Institute of Caribbean Studies, the leading Caribbean American diaspora organization, and celebrated as the convening chair of the campaign for June as National Caribbean American Heritage Month. Dr. Nelson, is an award-winning writer and storyteller, was the only Black female in her graduating class with a doctorate in engineering management from the George Washington University in the 1990. Dr. Nelson was named a White House Champion of Change in 2012. And with that, I will hand it over to, let's go ahead and go with Dr. Nelson since she's already off mute first. If you want to do your presentation, you're welcome to go ahead and share your screen and get going.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not sure if my screen share is going to work. Let's see. Greetings and salutations, everyone. It is a great day here in Washington, D.C. I'm not sure where everybody is calling in from, but let's see if I can get my slides to be shared. Let's see. All right. Hopefully. Are you seeing anything?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not even sure what I'm seeing myself here, but we'll see. All right, let's see if I can get it looking like something. Okay, so As you heard, I'm the author of a book, Smart Futures for a Flourishing World. I'm going to say I had an opportunity to just listen to the session before, and I really was excited because I've been really concerned about black land ownership in America. So I'm really excited to have met some of those people. And they might be sorry that they said they're inviting people because I will show up and be ready to quote unquote spend the night. I've always wanted to have an opportunity to visit like a black community in America, because in so many ways I see the black American nation as a developing nation, and my worldview is basically coming from an immigrant to this country from a small island called Jamaica, and working globally, doing economic development. Really, also wishing I could have an opportunity to sort of practice some of what I do in the Caribbean and Africa here in the United States. So I'm really excited about the last panel and looking forward to hopefully doing something with them. So the book Smart Futures for a Flourishing World really is my entry point post COVID into getting my ideas on the table. I think when COVID hit, I was so stressed out, upset, nervous, especially after I saw, let's test the vaccine in Africa. I'm like, okay, no, you don't. So that really got me really fired up. And I'm going to read, because we're talking about cooperative economics, I want to read an excerpt from a book that a colleague who does futures publications really reached out to lots of futurists and says, okay, what now? And this book is called Aftershock and Opportunities. And we're actually write something about the future that would happen like right after COVID. And we're asked to go no further out than 2027 because, there's so many things happening in the next couple of years. So this request was in 2020. So I wrote this in 2020. It wasn't published over till 2021, but I didn't change it because I thought it was still, really valid. So my response was because of this, let's test the vaccine in Africa. So I got very mad. So my essay was called Reimagining the World Order to Regenerate African, Caribbean, and Pacific Economies. And how can nations in Africa, the Caribbean, and Pacific recover and regenerate their economies? September the 20th, 27. The following speech is by the architect of the Smart Futures paradigm, was aired live worldwide on the interactive multimedia Africa World channel from the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Billions of people worldwide eagerly awaited the United Nations announcement on the Smart Futures Fund's multi-pronged approach to decision making and rapid response resilience engineering on the Sustainable Development Goal 17 Partnerships for the Goals. The regenerative economic model proposed by the Ubuntu Economy Agenda is the pillar around which a robust, resilient global economy is being rebuilt from the ruins left by economic devastation set off in 2020 by the pandemic crisis. Welcome to ACAPA Rising, the African Caribbean Pacific Alliance Civil Society Forum, the third since our founding in 2022, and the official launch of the Ubuntu Economy Agenda. We have arrived here after a harrowing journey through the wilderness of what many of us call the holy transition, and we have good news. The good news is that we have created our forum as a parallel but integral part of institutions that in the past excluded us. And very quickly, some headlines. Today, ACAPA countries enjoy a telehealth network that penetrates 30% of all the primary cities and secondary towns in the ACAPA countries. We have a diaspora health bond matched by our friends in the philanthropy sector, and we're reaching 10 million people with our mix and match solutions such as pharmacy in a box. In terms of education, 30 universities in ACAPA countries have partnered with universities in the global north and south to form the Consortium of Sustainable Future Centers. And we count among our successes the establishment of a Blue Economy Decision Support System centers. And I go on. But what is important, I said, this ragged band of 150 ACAPA outlaws, outcasts, outliers, heretics, and troublemakers have seen our vision of multiplying circles of 150 take root and spread, and we're now 15,000 strong and growing. We began this journey neck deep in dread, but holding on to hope, knowing that for us, children of the formerly enslaved, our ancestors have survived much more horrific events. In the art of change making, there is what the social scientists call the inciting action. For us in the Akapa diaspora, the fact that blacks in America were dying at a higher rate from the pandemic than other segments of the population, and the news that then US President had denied the export of ventilators to Barbados and test kits to Jamaica were the tipping point. And I stop there and I go on to explain this agenda. I wanted to start there because this story, although it's a fictional story, is very much about who I am as a sustainability engineer and activist, who I am as a conjurer of change. And I use the word conjurer with deliberate intent because change making, such as what we're trying to do here in the Black Sustainable Network, is not necessarily something you can plan out every single step. You might have some ideas, but you kind of have to step into this void of unknowingness and knowing what you can do and what your vision is, but then hope and pray that the ancestors rise to meet you and the source, divine source, provides additional help that you might need to move forward. This is how we have survived to this date, and this is how I think we might have to survive going forward to talk about building a network of Black change makers working across the ecosystem that is sustainability. And it's a broad economic system. So if you think about the idea of those of us who are on this platform being the voice of the voiceless for those who are not here, those who are not yet even awake to the fact that they should be here, right? We have to conjure change by creating a new narrative. And I'm really excited that this organization is existing and trying to tie the pieces together of different people like myself working in our own space, but getting us to meet each other, know each other, and see how we might create new partnerships for change, new partnerships. Sustainable Development Goal 17 is about partnerships, and I know they're talking about big partnerships, UN and all these agencies, but we also on the ground must do new partnerships if we are to move at the pace we might need to move. So why smart futures, and what does smart futures mean? When we look at the situation we find ourselves in 2020 when I wrote this book, it was COVID-19, racial uprising had kind of shocked everybody following the George Floyd merger, where all these environmental disasters had been happening since like 2018 here in America. If it was not a flood, it was a tornado, it was a hailstorm, you name it, wildfires. We've gone through everything in America. And yet everybody was still saying, well, there's no climate change. It's just like whatever. I don't know what they're thinking. But clearly, those of us who are watching the signs as the hurricane just passed through again Florida, wiped so much of the state out, we realize that it's not business as usual. And some of us have to wake up and smell the coffee and realize that there are all these threats to ourselves as the human species. All these threats, again, unemployment or communities, social exclusion, whether you are in Africa and your tribe is not, the leading tribe. There's all these ways in which people are disadvantaged and not participating, from a place of dignity in the human economy. And so my thought then was to think about how might we look at this world that's on fire, right? The fact that the world is dying and find a new paradigm. Stop denying, first of all, the earth is dying. And in time, I thought, it's time that me as a Black woman from an island nation, since we're going to be so much underwater, so many of the smaller islands will be underwater if if the sea level rise is not arrested, right? I know for Black America, so many coastal zone communities are going to be underwater. So many low-lying lands will be underwater. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. This fact that the planet is dying and is screaming out for help. And we are not necessarily the first that they call to the table when it is a conversation to be held on, either national policies or state policies. We get called only when they want to have like a token conversation about, oh, well, let's get more diversity in here. That thing really irritates me very much. And so I thought, let me take myself and put myself out there. So when the opportunity came to write a book about smart futures, I would have to be honest and say at first I was a little bit like, oh my God, but I'm going to write a book. I don't know more book. But I've been talking about this stuff for so long, right? And my best friend said, no, 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 you're not going to back out of this. This the reason why they call you is because God is ready for you to go out to the world and say what you have to say. You have a unique voice and you've got to use it. So Smart Futures really is about a paradigm shift. And this one I definitely would like to see black elected officials take up, right? We're talking about the fact that we are rapidly crossing the planetary boundaries. And those of you who may not know this, some of you I'm sure know this, there are 9 planetary boundaries that scientists have identified. Some have not been quantified, but these planetary boundaries really the ones that they're talking about is ozone layer depletion, air pollution, biodiversity loss, land conversion, freshwater withdrawals, nitrogen and phosphorus loading, chemical pollution, and climate change and ocean acidification. And so if we cross all of those 9, we're toast as a species. Period. Right? So it's all well and good that the whole world wants to be developed, and America has done a fantastic job of crushing any dissension over the past several years. Well, they're not necessarily doing all that well. We see what's happening in Venezuela. We see that they're still trying to say, okay, Cuba cannot exist as the way it does, and they're still, having up Cuba. I don't know why they don't just give up on Cuba after all these years. But anyway, that model is not working. Meanwhile, we know that China has took itself as a communist country, created a capitalist system on top of, the communist model, and basically shown that capitalism does not have to run exactly like how it's run in America. Now, you may not like what China is doing, but the fact is they really have done a great experiment, and this is what has taken them from 100 years ago where they were as like under the heel of Great Britain. China was once an outpost of Great Britain because of Hong Kong, that history that maybe is not been talked about a lot. But China kind of rose up and said, wait a minute, we're tired of being this, we're tired of being the underdog. I mean, there are a billion of us, we can't continue like this. And they kind of set out on a path for themselves and look where they are today. Everything we buy practically is from China. It's actually quite scary when you think about everything that we buy, even food is being imported from China, even though we have arable land here, because we have been fed such a steady diet of consume, 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 cheap, 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 pay as little as possible, pay people as little as possible, that we have this cycle that is driving us into a possible overshoot of the planetary boundaries and at the same time creating a shortfall. I don't have to say much about the shortfall here because you're all, on this call, I think, very aware the fact that right now, the fact that we're still having to fight for political voice in this country, in some of your states, that some small cities are being, played a fool around with, and mayors are losing money and all this stuff to kind of keep, whether it's the water issue or the land issue. But the water issue is big, obviously, because you know what's happening in some of the towns across America, the black towns across America and black cities across America. This idea of the shortfall that we have set as a global society, which America has signed on to. I mean, they basically run the United Nations kind of ish. Like if they veto something, it's more or less dead. Yet here in America, they're not living that promise and that practice. So this diagram comes out of the work that a woman from Oxford did. It's called Donut Economic Framework. I don't like the word donut economics because, some of us in our community suffer badly from diabetes. So I've decided to call it lifesaver economics or lifebuoy economics because donuts is the sugar, it's bad for us. So I prefer lifesaver economics but that ring, the safe just space for humanity, is where we have to design our economy to be in the future. So clearly it cannot continue to be a winner take all, slash burn, do what you want, pillage and plunder kind of economy that has what has taken America and Europe to their supremacy in the world that we are today, right? And I say we because we're in America, even though we're not being part of the slash and burn leadership class, but we still are in this society which basically has said Britain, US being as English speaking country comes out of the British colonial system. Even though it might have been being independent for many years, but that whole legal system and the whole structure comes out of the slave economy, out of which we were once actually the commodity itself. So clearly, an economy in which we were the commodity itself, we cannot be talking about a reparative justice system that is based on the same economy. There's something wrong with that picture. This is just my opinion. People think I'm crazy, but I'm going to put it out there. So I'm not one of these hip hip hooray reparations person, even though I'm an anti-black racism activist, because I'm like, okay, but what is the future going to look like? Who is going to be the underclass in an American system which is based on capitalism, unless you at the same time you're talking about reparations, but it's in Jamaica and the Caribbean talking about reparations, and in Jamaica, quite frankly, when all the banks are owned by, Lebanese, Syrians, Indians, etc., I don't know that the black people at the base are going to get anything either, even if reparations were paid. So I have the same argument whether or not I'm here in the US or here in Caribbean region. My conversation is the same. What are we repairing to? What is the new economic system that we who are going to be waving a flag and say we want justice now, economic justice now? What is it that we are repairing to? How are we going to create the safe, just space for humanity, for future generations that allows us to have a life of dignity with education and peace and justice and health and all of these things, and not at the same time overshoot? We have a lot of work to do, and hence this is a framework in which the whole SMART agenda was born. On this diagram, you see some of the areas of red is where they already know we're in danger. The amber is a warning, and the green is when, okay, we're still safe. So you kind of see that, the scientists have been measuring this, and there's a whole organization, I think, in Stockholm that spends a lot of time, talking about this. Even though, as I said, there's not any global quantification. And of course, because of all these new things which are happening in terms of synthetic biology and climate engineering, there's some things which are not even yet properly defined. But we have to pay attention to those things because, we're always the one experimented on. So I suggest we begin to pay attention to the economies that are arising out of synthetic biology and AI and all those other things that are happening around us. I want to put on the table then the SMART futures, which, first of all, the S in SMART stands for sustainable systems. It's a design framework. It's basically saying anybody who's designing a project, program, whatever, needs to think about a design system where S is sustainable systems. And it's predicated about the sustainable development goals, all 17 of them. We want to kind of move in the direction. We know we're not going to make it by 2030, but I really want to see black cities in America in particular make a big effort to use these guiding principles as a shared vision of what it is we want to move towards. Black communities, black counties, black cities. Can we use something that is already agreed on globally, that there are some numbers, and can we use this to create a conversation about the kind of economics that these cities want to support if they're going to be smart? The M in SMART is about metrics. And I've picked out these 6 in particular because I think, we can't do all 17. But certainly decent work and economic growth and no poverty will be the first 2, I think, that certainly if you are in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, where you have land, right, as we heard before, that you could actually do some really interesting things, right, in terms of, food, housing, and those things. You could really benefit from what people are thinking about, these new economic theories and ways of being. People who are working across the aisle, even in parties, Green Party, working Families Party, the unions, they begin to think about what does a new economic movement look like. And SDG 10 in particular, which is the one about inequalities, have really not been paid attention to. And I think it's the one that certainly we, if nobody else, ought to pay attention to, because we're the ones that really are the most unequal class of all. Blacks in America, blacks in Latin America are the 2 most unequal, quote unquote, peoples in the world. That is research I did when I was working at the Inter-American Development Bank and opening the conversation on that. So this is why I feel like the principle of cooperative economics, and I'm calling an Ubuntu economic agenda globally, is what I'm trying to kind of talk about when I speak to black communities about what is it we want to create. How are we going to use tools that have been around for a long time and use the technology of today to move it forward? So the M in smart is about the metrics. So we're measuring things differently. It's all well and good to have a few superstars who are billionaires and say, hey, yeah, Oprah did it, or LeBron James or whoever, P Diddy or whatever. But the fact is, the masses of us are not there, and the masses of us are still like wage slaves basically. So we're talking about wealth creation, right? And those of us who do have land, as we heard in the last session, it's not yet organized in a way to benefit from the land. So a lot of work to be done. So the Ubuntu economic agenda is a global one in which I am seeing the African diaspora here in America, which is the wealthiest group of blacks in the world, are kind of partnering with their colleagues and sisters, brothers, cousins they left behind, friends from high school, and say, how do we do business differently across the borders and boundaries? Trade, investment, in food stuff, in the things we wear, the things that we need to have, right? So we can begin to change the narrative around what it might look like. From an engineering perspective, I've been looking at what has been happening in the conversation, and some of you would know about what's happening in terms of the credit union movement and the land trust. And I think that what is happening, a lot of people don't know, and it is our responsibility to kind of begin to really get the word out that there are new ways of working, new forms of ownership. That actually, this smartphone really gives an opportunity to do differently. So A Smart is about agency. All of us have the agency to be a part of the change we want to see, right? So is there something in our community that is a test bed that we might say, okay, maybe I'll join this black owned farmer network or something and pay your certain dues just to see if it could work, even if you don't believe in it fully. If it's under $30 a month, seriously, I mean, you pay spend that much on coffee at Starbucks. Why not spend it with a black farmer and to see if you could at least help to test the model, right? This is what I want to put on the table for conversation. How might we really get more of us, those of us who are here, like in space like Maryland, we may not necessarily have a lot of black farms, although I'm finding out more about them these days. I just found one actually, and I want to go and visit them, hopefully, up the road from me. But the fact is, we have a hard time finding each other. So, how do we begin to test out these ways of being? How do we begin to work with our universities, the HBCUs who have business schools and who have agriculture departments and engineering schools to talk about educating young people? Thank you. Educating young people about the principles of a regenerative economy. And the R in SMART is about resilience. So it's about the resilience of our economies and being in right relationship, being responsive, being regenerative, right? And this is something I certainly want to expose as we talk some more. And let me just jump ahead because I see my time is up. And so the Smart Futures approach is about using this approach to design systems. And I've had the fortune of being invited to some conversations with an organization called Engineering for One Planet, which is about educating engineers to think sustainability. I'm an engineer, so I'm very much focused there. And one of the things I'd like to do in the coming year, because I've told them I would like support for this, is to get to the engineering schools and HBCUs in particular, or predominantly black institutions, such as, which are not HBCUs, but they're predominantly black serving institutions in the South, to begin to make sure that their business schools and their engineering schools begin to understand these principles of sustainability that tie into the way we measure success and will hopefully tie into our ability to create what I'm also calling a solidarity economy. So I'd like to stop there. Thank you so much for the opportunity to set out a framework for my thinking, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nelson, for your wealth of knowledge. I definitely need to talk offline with you about all of this stuff. I'm a building scientist, and I don't want to take up the session. Um, but what we're gonna do now is we're going to transition into our next speaker. You can go ahead and share the screen. I don't want to butcher your name again. And And don't forget to take yourself off mute.
Okay, thank you so much. Um, that was a great presentation, and I look forward. Do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I don't know why it's not showing up for me here. I did something wrong here. Okay, there we go. All right, so just wanted to quickly say a couple of things about my life. I've had like 22 years working in cooperatives and the solidarity economy. And one of those things has been taking care of my mother for 3 years. I consider that solidarity economy work, where we don't leave people we love to institutions. And solidarity economy is all about taking care of our own in ways that the system does not. So I just want to say about myself, I shop at farmers markets, and I've been members of community supported agriculture. I've been a member of the Tacoma Park Silver Spring Food Cooperative on the DC border since 2001. A regular shopper at Glut Food Cooperative in Mount Rainier, Maryland, which is just outside of DC since the 1980s. I conduct financial affairs at credit unions since 2008 and a community development bank since 2003, when we started using it as a housing cooperative. I understand that big box banks can be convenient and have other advantages, but we should try to support our local credit unions or loan funds, because this is solidarity economics. This, it's not just about, theory, but it's about practice. It's about what we do every day in our own lives and how we affect other people. I also try to support people who are trying to start businesses, particularly co-op businesses, whenever I can, 5, 10, 15, 50, or $100. That's part of solidarity economy or alternative economy, where we use funds that we have to support others. And so if you spend your money consciously and make a decision that you will not support businesses that are damaging the planet, are racist, or doing other things that are not supporting the world and our people, then you're participating in the solidarity economy. You're making a difference in your life and in other people's lives. So what is this, the alternative economy, solidarity economy? It's stuff that we already know. If you grew up in certain communities, you did this. You put your money together to buy some fuel or to buy some food. You started a buying club. It can be something that is self-financed. It's cooperative loan funds, credit unions, recycling, swap shops, free stores, flea markets, free food in refrigerators or containers. This is something that started after the pandemic got rolling and people were starving. So people came up with ingenious ideas to get food to people. Community gardens, community composting, community-based insurance, cooperative food storage, collective land ownership or community land trust, susus, where you put, a group of 5 or 10 people get together and they put some money out and one person gets that money and then they can do what they need to do to start a business or do whatever. Ecological projects, the commons, that's everything that we share in common, the land, the water, public institutions. All of these are the comments, the things that we all use. Self-employment, cooperatives. I want to talk more about that, but there are several types of cooperatives. Family and collective businesses, even businesses that are owned by nonprofits. Do-it-yourself democratic ESOPs, which is a company has been a traditional capitalist business for years. Maybe the owner is ready to retire. And so instead of selling it to some other person, they sell it to the workers. And so it's converted from a regular business to what they call an ESOP. But it's really a worker co-op if it's done by the workers and done in a democratic way. The workers own, it's an employee-owned business. Bartering. We've all bartered. You can't afford to pay for your hair to get done, so you might cook for the hairdresser or clean their house or whatever in exchange, exchanging service as opposed to using money as the element of exchange. Ethical purchasing. Do not support companies that exploit the earth. Collectives. Volunteering, that a lot of work gets done through volunteering. Helping someone by giving them money, skills, or your expertise. Acts of solidarity, raising money for causes, sharing your technical skills. Black cultural schools and organizations, raising the next generation to do what we need to do. The numbers, I don't know if other people know what the numbers are, but in South Florida, you know, you used to spend like $1, you play a number. If it comes out in the horses, you might get $70 on every dollar that you spent. I mean, it was before these big lottery ripoffs now, but that was the way people made it, was the illegal economy. And of course, the Black Sustainability Network. So some people call it alternative economy. Some people call it the solidarity economy, which is, you know, popular now. And if it's co-ops, co-ops help each other. So if it's co-ops working together, it's called the cooperative economy. Okay, so a definition, I've given you many examples, but it's a loose network of people-powered, people-created ways to survive outside of what is known as the traditional economic system. The traditional capitalist economic system cares nothing for people except for as workers, cheap labor. And so we have to design a system that cares for people. Often they spring out of need or desire to help. And you know, I think of my grandmother. She would not have thought of herself as participating in the solidarity or alternative economy, but she did. She kept in her attic furniture, pots and pans, and clothing to help needy families. And when they came to town, my grandmother would help them get set up. Pooling money so someone could get money to start a business or go to school or get an operation or whatever. We've done this. Our communities, this is how we survived. When I went to college, people brought me clothing and money to send me off. So we know this. We didn't call it this, but we've been practicing it since we've been in this country. Some people feel like the Underground Railroad was one of the first examples of a solidarity effort or a solidarity economy, if you will, because it took a lot of cooperation to get people across land. And I just recently learned that most of the people who escaped slavery escaped by ships and boats. We've always known about Harriet and, you know, but when you think about it, it was more difficult to get people from the South to Canada and other places north on land. It was took much longer, more dangerous, dogs and everything chasing you. But there were many Black people who worked on ships and boats. And so a lot more people left that way. So it took a lot of effort, cooperation, working together, trust to do that. So we've been doing solidarity work for quite a while. So they can be local, like Corporation Jackson or the Philadelphia Area Association of Cooperatives. They can be state organizations, regional organizations, geographical. The Federation of Southern Cooperatives, they've been around for quite a while. And their stated purpose was to save Black land. Farmers were trying to save their lands. And so they came together to do that. National economies, worldwide through the computer, by industry or specialization, Doctors Without Borders and Herbalists Without Borders. Formal economies or organizations, or informal. So one is organized and one is not. We just do it. So they can be loosely governed. They can be grassroots, and most of them are grassroots. They are collectives. They make decisions by group vote. Some of them are hierarchical or professionally managed. You can have everybody who, as a farmer could hire or could come together and hire somebody to manage the work that they do to get other people to join them. And it could be a hierarchical organization. But usually it requires a handful of committed people to get projects up and running and to sustain them. And this is an important point that I want to make. No matter what we do, there's always going to be a handful of people who really do most of the work and make sure it happens. I've been doing this work for over 20 years, and I've seen this, and some people get upset by it. And some people, don't quite understand it. Sorry about that. And, but we just have to come to understand that not everybody learns at the same pace or is in the same space. And some of us just have to hold the ground, hold the space until people understand that they need to do better. And so it may take just so much more of your time. I live in a housing co-op, and I'm not going to allow the developers to get this. So that might mean I might need to do a little bit more work while other people figure that out. But somebody has to save the housing co-op. So that's something, when we do this kind of work, we have to understand. And then sociocracy. That's a way of organizing meetings and making decisions that is a little faster and easier on the mind and the body, so that we can get things done. Okay. Oh, did I do that one already? Okay. Right. Okay. So how do we do this? It's easy because we've been doing it already. We just need to, grasp people and organize them a little better. Look around in your neighborhood, your city, your state, or your region, and figure out who's there, what kind of groups are there, what kind of cooperatives there are. It may be that there may not be any in your area, or the only one might be the rural utility cooperatives, because that's how a lot of people get their water and sewage and lights and internet, because they have to come together. And it's really interesting in a capitalist society that people have to form co-ops to get some of these basic things. But if we remember that capitalism is about making money as opposed to filling people's need, we understand. So people form co-ops who wouldn't do it otherwise to get some basic things. So is there anybody trying to save the land? You have a land trust. Who are the farmers? Where do you get your food? And where do they sell their goods? Who are the small entrepreneurs who sell barbecue under the trees on Saturday? The churches that sell dinners to the community to raise money. How could they come together? Could you help them come together and help each other do some mutual support? Could you bring jobs and income to you, to yourself and your community by organizing history tours or whatever your community needs? You know, you look around and you see what's missing. And here I want to make a point about how we have allowed Europeans to define what's human and what's humane and what is humanity. When Black people, I think, in the world have the most reason to, not reason, to experience, to be the ones to define humanity. And so, you know, the stuff that they talk about is, you know, like human failure and whatever, that might be a European thing. But humanity, as is expressed by African people, is quite a different thing. I mean, we will go out of our way to help people, to feed the hungry, to give money to people who need it, even when we're poor. And so I think we as a people need to take back the conversation, to lead, to really lead this world when we talk about what needs to be done to serve people. We need to be bold and creative in expressing our creative genius to save each other and to save the planet. You know, we're in a critical point in our lives right now, and in the world, in the history of the world and the planet. We don't have time to let white people run the world anymore. They're about to destroy and kill the earth and everybody else with it. And so we just need to step up and understand our special role in the world. And that includes taking care of our health. We can't save the world if we die of diabetes or cancer, because we eating any and everything. We're not, you know, reading labels to see what kind of chemicals are in the foods, or we're too busy to do breast self-exam or even to cook a meal for ourselves. And we just eat what other people make. And we're eating their energy and their anger and their hatred and self-hatred. When they cook for us, that goes into our foods. So we have to have enough self-love to cook for ourselves and do things for ourselves and support people out there who are, you know, trying to bring us good and healthy foods. And we have to do things, we have to think about how do we spend our time and organize, you know, in arenas like this to make sure that all of our people can have a certain decent level of existence. And that might include and should include manufacturing. How do we start some manufacturing businesses? How do we level up what we do? So I just want to talk a little bit about cooperatives, because cooperatives are a way that we can take care of a lot of our needs. You know, Du Bois, he was involved in setting up co-ops. In fact, after slavery, Jessica Gordon Nimhart talks a lot about this in her book, Collective Courage. Black people had to take care of our own needs. So we started off with mutual aid societies. You know, they wouldn't sell us insurance. So Black people, you know, set up groups to get our own insurance, you know, healthcare, all these things. We helped each other. And so from that developed cooperatives. And by the time Du Bois was big, there were like 154 cooperatives. And Du Bois had a notion that Black people needed to decide whether we were going with the cooperative businesses or would we go with the way that the country was going, to the whole capitalist, all about myself. And unfortunately, they chose those at that time, they chose to go with America because we wanted to be citizens. And then they were making cooperatives to be communist organizations. And, white people were scared of us organizing our own cooperative businesses and taking care of our own needs. And so they killed us for organizing co-ops, for taking care ourselves, because they wanted our business. They needed us to work in their factories. So they terrorized us. And so a lot of people felt it was safe to just go with what the white folks were doing. But it was cooperatives that brought us from those times. When we talk about the civil rights movement, we have to understand that it was cooperatives that brought us all the way up to today. Now, we lost that history. We didn't know that history until Jessica Gordon Nimhart, brought her book out. And so we're relearning the history. When I was a member of the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, the whole thing, when you try to talk to Black people about co-ops, they thought that was a white hippie thing. And we were like, they have no idea. And I'm like, Jessica, you gotta hurry up and write that book. Because we were the only two Black people in the whole cooperative movement. You have to write the book so Black people understand that this was Blackness. This was Black people's way to survive. Sure, there was the Rochdale cooperatives in Europe, but this sprung from our existence. And, I talk about the Underground Railroad as a cooperative, a solidarity economy organization. We always had to survive. And, and whether people know it or not, we're back at that situation. So a co-op is a business organized for the benefit of its members. That's the basic definition. So the benefit could be cheaper housing or housing with people like you. It could be getting solar power. It could be childcare for your community or elder care. It can be rewarding and non-exploitative work. So your members could be workers. They could be worker co-ops. They could be homeowners, customers, farmers, mothers, youth, daycare. Anybody can organize a co-op, for work or for pleasure. You want to travel the world, you can organize a co-op to do that. You can organize a co-op to bury people. So it is owned by the members who produce the service or have the place like a housing co-op. It's managed by the members, or can be managed by the members. Sometimes people hire professionals. They are patronized by the member owners. They service the needs of the co-ops. The profits, the benefits, and the costs are borne by or shared with the members. The co-ops have concern for community and concern for the environment, which is quite different from other capitalist businesses. So, they often serve a need that's not there. They provide employment and meaningful work or income, and enables small farmers and businesses to buy equipment. This is important. You might start a business, but you don't have a lot of money. And so you can join with other people who are in the same type of business. And, everybody contributes money to buying this big piece of equipment. Or the community could actually do that. You can organize community cooperatives with, say, $1 membership. And these are some of the things you could do. Figure out what the community needs and do it that way. So there are many reasons people organize co-ops. There's some bigger ones, Ocean Spray, that we don't really realize that are co-ops. The Florida Natural Growers, REI, Ace Hardware, Land O'Lakes, Blue Diamond, Nationwide Insurance, self-help federal credit unions, even United and Southwest Airlines are employee owned. At least they were. I hope things haven't changed, but they may have. Okay, so there's a lot of people in co-ops now that we don't really know about. 30,000 US cooperatives operated 73,000 places of business. They have 3 trillion in assets. And this was done some time ago, so there's probably more than that now. They create 850,000 jobs. So, co-ops aren't new, and they're pretty much spread out through the whole economy as it is. But the problem is, it's not reaching out to more and more people. And I think the time is definitely nigh for that. I mentioned Jessica's book. There are a handful of Black cooperatives. I mentioned the Federation of Southern Co-ops. Us lifting up in us in Atlanta did a coffee shop that didn't last very long, but we have to applaud the effort, and it's important to learn why these things fail. I do know that one of the big problems when we try to organize co-ops is that our minds are still colonized. We've been taught to be individualistic, to only be concerned about ourselves. And it's always going to be somebody who's going to be in that effort who will try to rip it off, that take advantage of all this collective work and appropriate it for themselves. So that's the issue we'll talk a little bit more about. Renaissance Food Cooperative in Greensboro didn't make it. Another group called Fertile Ground Co-op, Food Co-op in Raleigh, they're starting up. And then of course, my co-op, Ella Jo Baker Intentional Community Cooperative, that's a housing co-op. So a lot of times we like Ella Jo was started by 5 African-American women. But right now we consider ourselves a multicultural organization because we have other people in our co-op. So cooperatives is some of the hardest work you will ever do. Understand that. It's not for everybody. Some people just don't want to make that commitment. But if you're hungry enough and you're committed enough, co-ops are great, and it could be one of the most rewarding things that you do. But I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a lot of work. And I'm not saying everybody has to do cooperatives. In our network, we should be big enough to encompass anybody who wants to start a business that's going to serve the Black community, whether it is, only for the profits are going to the owner solely. So we have a range of options, but we have to set the rules of how we're going to support people. And so I just want to end at this point by talking about the things you must understand when you're working to do this kind of organizing. And I mentioned already, a handful of people will really do the work. That's a given. We are all affected by internalized racism and internalized oppression and individualism. We must have strategies to recognize it in ourselves, first of all, and in other people. And we have to be able to accept criticism, because this stuff is unconscious a lot of times. We've been brainwashed so successfully that sometimes we can become our worst enemies because we're operating off of the matrix. The stuff we see on TV, where we think how things should be or how family should be. My sister used to have a real problem because we were not the family she saw on TV. It's just amazing. So, we need to know how we're being affected and also try to develop strategies to deal with some of the traumas and stuff that we've gone through as children. education and training is a must. We have to be educated and train ourselves. Okay, thank you. So you must organize governing documents. And as I mentioned before, we need to take ownership of what it means to be human. And we can work with other groups, but never forget that only we will take care of ourselves. And we must allow all of our aspects of as human beings to come to light and contribute to saving ourselves and the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I guess now we can go ahead and open it up for questions. If anyone has any formal questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand on the Zoom, and I'll call on you accordingly. Don't everyone jump
I
out
have a
there.
question. I have a question. Of the Adjo, because um I have been looking at doing a cooperative, um and in doing the research in DC area in DC, it was very challenging.
Oh
It's
yeah.
not easy. So that's the first thing. How can we get cities like a DC or a state like Maryland, where we supposedly have enough people in the different state houses, economic development departments, to really upgrade their small business departments to have somebody who understands it? Because then when I looked, I said, okay, I have to do a course. It's like, okay, I don't have the money. I'm trying to start something, and everything costs a lot of money. So it's like you can't even get free stuff from this small the business department, because nobody there knows what the cooperative law
Right.
is. And then, so how can we really get that done? Let's say here in this area, you're also in the Tacoma Park area in Maryland somewhere, that at least one of the states in this GMV area will have a more robust support system, that people are paid to do this job. I mean, economic development departments are there, but they don't have somebody who can help us. So, my attempt, I would say, I don't like to use the word failure, but it didn't succeed yet. It may end up being something different. It may end up being a B Corp for the reason that you're talking about. We just didn't hold it together, and then we all scattered. But I still think enough of us want to do something together that might not end up being a cooperative, but might be a B Corp, because maybe we're not yet spiritually mature enough yet to do a cooperative. So we can start with something else where the impact assessment numbers are clear. But this thing of the law and the support system, is there anybody, or are you aware of any lower cost budget organization in this area that actually supports the training or the development of the legal paperwork and the articles of incorporation that need to happen?
Well, first of all, DC does have antiquated co-op laws. There is a list of states that have some states have co-op laws on the books already. Massachusetts, California, I remember those, but I don't think there's even 20 of them. So that's one of the things that we can do, is to start to lobby our city and state governments, county governments, to try to get them to either add cooperative statutes or update them so that they're more modern. DC's co-op law basically refers to housing, how to organize housing co-ops. So we need to do that on the one hand. On the second hand, there are some groups they changed the name, but they used to be Working World, that will help people to start co-ops. But basically, you just need, one of the main things you need to is to decide. Even the states don't have to have a co-op law. You can organize as a LLC or B Corp or any kind of corp, but your governing documents can means that you can work as a co-op, as long as you put it in your documents that we will operate this way. It's going to be co-op, da da da. So you don't necessarily have to organize as a co-op business in a state that doesn't have it. But if I remember correct, Maryland had a pretty good system, But when we were thinking about some growth folks and I were working on setting up a cooperative incubator, and we actually decided to incorporate in Delaware because Delaware had the most liberal, laws. And so you can do that as a foreign corporation. So that's another option. But basically, I just want to say, like, there are several resources online that you can go in and it tell you step by step how to organize a co-op. ACE, which stands for Association of Cooperative Educators, ACE.coop has a whole series of videos on how to organize a co-op. And then at geo.coop, that's the organization I work for, the publication. You just go in on that site and search for how to start a co-op, and there's lots of people that have written stuff, so you can go there. Now, one of the problems is finding co-op lawyers, like you mentioned. People don't understand. Most lawyers don't understand co-ops. Most business organizations have no clue. Most state and local governments don't really understand. So that's our job, to try to educate these people or find resources that already, like lawyers, there's a bunch of co-op lawyers now, considering that it used to not be a whole lot, but they're out there. So we just have to, get smarter about organizing and networking with these professionals. Okay, so yeah, well, one of the problems with hiring consultants is that, they want to get paid too. And often when we're trying to start the co-op, we don't have money to pay them. So sometimes they come up with ingenious kinds of ways, like they'll help you organize the co-op. And then when you start making money, then a certain percentage, maybe 3% or 10%, will go towards paying them. But really, you can do this on your own. If you get the resources. Now you may have to hire a lawyer, and you definitely need a CPA or somebody to watch the books. Those things will get you in trouble if you don't, have those set. But basically, you can do this yourself if you have the time and the commitment. But yeah, there's problems with the money, and even some funding you can get, but you do want to be careful with the funding because, people, the book, The Revolution Will Not Be Funded, taught us that lesson that people will take their money back if you don't run the party line or what they want you to be about. They can take your money back. But if you take their money back, but if you take funding, you have to understand that you have to build your fundraising muscles. You don't just take the money and then expect to, keep looking next year for that same money. You need to be learning how to talk to your community and get them to support you, because one day that funding is going away for whatever reasons. And you need to have, people in the community know who you are, be used to supporting you, even if it's $1. Ella Jo Baker, when she organized co-ops during the 1930s, she had a penny a day campaign where, you could spend save a penny or put a penny toward organizing this. In Mondragon, Spain, they did a similar thing with $5. People were poor, but everybody could afford $5 to give to the co-op. We need to do a similar kind of thing. Get Black people to fund our organizations. And so, yeah, we just have to be a little bit more ingenious on how to do these things, but they can be done.
Recording in progress.
I'm sorry, my computer is messing up.
Yeah, I saw you was entering. Any other questions? Any thoughts? Anybody had experience with co-ops?
Yeah, unfortunately, our other speaker wasn't able to join us, but is running a cooperative that works with youth, formerly incarcerated youth that are learning agricultural skills, business skills, and they produce a product. So this is a very interesting model too. That worker owner type piece, I believe, is their model.
But
And
if it,
I wonder,
it
do you
doesn't,
think that kind of model of worker owner, member owner piece would be more appealing to Black folks, our people, so they feel more invested?
I
Uh,
think that is what we were
they
trying to
just,
do. We were trying to
I'm sorry.
do we were I don't know where this feedback has come from. We were trying to do I guess hybrid purchasing selling cooperative. So we're going to be supporting small farmers and small food processors in Caribbean region, then bringing up the products and then marketing them here on our brand name. So we still want to do that. But the idea was to have us do it as a group. But in order to do it as a group, because it was a new model and I didn't want to have it like as only my company, I was trying to say, okay, let's be a cooperative with an impact investment model in terms of the cooperative would have shares would go back to the farmers themselves because the farmers in the Caribbean are not that well paid, and then should it also come to the host organization that is basically coming up with the idea, which is our organization. It was very hard to find, as I said, a consultant. When he started looking at what would happen in DC, he decided not to take the funding that we did have to pay him because he said he didn't feel he could do a good job and he didn't want to take our money and not do it well because he really believed in what we're trying to do. But I should keep in touch with him, to let if he could answer any question he could answer. But the groups that I reached out to in DC, nobody was able to say, come to this class and it's $30. It was always like $300 or once it gets in that level, it sort of now becomes a burden. If it's like a $15 class or $20 class, people can do that without having to think about it. And then so I'm just saying that while you say that there's stuff online, I don't think there is enough support for this new cooperative economics from the small business entities that do exist. And I do think that certainly for those of us, yes, I've heard of Frontier and I'm trying to get them to actually come to my conference in November. So in November, we're going to be doing yet another agribusiness conference looking at how do we create partnerships with ourselves here as diaspora and people who are growing stuff in Africa and Caribbean to import stuff we need here, as well as how do we create partnership with HBCUs who have agricultural schools to see how they can do training in those countries. So it's a pretty, I would say, fairly complex idea, but it's not that complex if you ask me.
Right.
To me, it's not complex, but people say it's complex. I don't see where it's that complex. It's pretty simple.
Right. They
It's
don't have
all
experience with
about
it.
just not having one person make all the profit and having those of us who put some money in to get this stuff off the ground, getting a return on investment,
Right.
but recognizing that we're not the experts and also ensuring that the farmers who are doing the hard labor, who are not paid a minimum wage, they don't have healthcare insurance, that we try to create some system. So Mondragon for me, and I'm glad you put Mondragon in there because Mondragon for me, I really wish that more of us in the world could really understand that model because that they're such a billion-dollar company and they're cooperative, I think is a big secret that nobody wants to really get out there. Because if more people understood that you could actually run
Mm-hmm.
as a city, a society where everybody's a cooperative of something, we could really turn around whether it's Mississippi, Alabama, or Kingston, or
Yes.
Clarendon, Jamaica, or
Yes.
Accra, where people are like just working at the margins. And I do feel that this conversation, Adjo, I'm glad you're actually active. And since you're here in this area, we're going to have a conversation and see what can we do because we're here
Mm-hmm.
that begins to test another angle. I'm not interested in housing for right now, although I think for elders that are losing their homes, we should be thinking about an elder housing cooperative model that
Mm-hmm.
allows people to age in a way that is culturally, and not have to go to these very informal corporate old
Right.
old people's homes. So
Right.
there's things I think we can be doing elder housing, more agriculture stuff, importing food from Africa or Caribbean somewhere, because we're eating these things anyway. We're eating
Right.
plantain,
And we
you
may as well
know,
help our people.
just so that we can really test another model. And that's what I would like to see some of us on this call have a call after the call to say, okay, how can we actually come up with even one test project? It may not necessarily be a success the way we want it, but I think even the lessons we learn, if it doesn't work, are useful for us to test a model that's not going to cost us too much. It didn't cost us too much. So even though we didn't work out, some people still want documents and when we're going to try again. Because they only had to pay 300 and they made back their 300. So at least they didn't lose any money from the test. You know what I mean? So I think that there are ways we can begin to test out new ways of being, new ways of operating. It's very important that it was five of us. It's five of us. We can't wait for 50 people because everybody wants to hop on after it's successful. So we got to find a way for us to start going. And so, Adra, I'm really happy that you're here in this area. I'm looking forward to probably talking with you.
Same here.
And anybody else, who's on this call, I can't get all the clicks. Hopefully, we don't shut down before I get all the clicks. But if you're on this call, please on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. Please connect with me on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you more. I would love to do something in Caribbean or something here in Maryland with some of the farmers that are already here in this area or in Delaware, because there are farmers all over the place that are looking for support. That we could get some small test bed started. Let's test something. That's what I want to do. We have to just do something now.
Oh yeah,
Yes, thank
definitely.
you. Thank you. We want these conversations to keep going on the Black Sustainability Network platform. When you join the membership, I think most of you are in there. We have our Mighty Network platform, and you can connect with people. You can, all the things you can do on LinkedIn and Facebook, you can do on our platform. But I mean, definitely get names, find people on LinkedIn, but we're forming groups. We'll be hosting, quarterly meetings. We're having committees, project committees and stuff like that. So we're not just gathering during the annual summit. We have things ongoing. We have a platform, customized platform for that. So that is blacksustainability.org, and click on join the network. If there's one last thing really quick, otherwise I need to share a screen and close out. So go ahead if anybody else has something quickly to say while I share my screen.
No, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you to you, both of you as our panelists. We really appreciate it. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right. We want to thank our sponsors, the main organizers of the summit each year, as well as all the presenters. Most of their logos are represented here. All of our volunteers, we thank you tremendously. We have upcoming programming, like I said, besides our annual summit, we're getting into more programming. We're launching our Black Environmental Leadership Certification Program, taking this summit road on the show on the road, going to the sites of different member partners through learning journeys. Please join our network, our website, our email is there. If you're already a member and you have any questions, you can email members@blacksustainability.org. That comes right to my inbox. And we have the summit website and the general website, merging, soon to be merged and relaunched. All right, so the session that is starting now is panel 6, Economic Effects of Gentrification and Green Entrepreneurship Opportunities with TJ Lofton and Adrienne Rice. I have already dropped the link in the chat, so go ahead and head over there. Thank you again to this session's panelists. We look forward to staying connected.
Thank you.
Thank you.